Tonight is the fifth Sunday of the month, the Scottsdale, Arizona Big Book meeting, and that means it is speaker night. Tonight we are very fortunate to have Janet B. to come share her experience, strength, and hope, where she will share for 30 minutes about her story and about her recovery in this program. With that, you're on, Janet.
Hi, everyone. So what would God dress up as for Halloween? I think, in my imagination, God would wear this like very regal captain's uniform, like a boat captain, because in my universe, God created the world in 6 days. And then instead of spending the rest of eternity sitting back watching Netflix, he spends it launching search and rescue missions for us addicts. So I picture it kind of like, in the movie Titanic, after the boat sank, there were these rescue boats that went out trying to rescue these people who couldn't rescue themselves. And so I think that's what God does. And, so I would like to talk about how he launched his search and rescue mission for me, kind of in the framework of the ABCs on page 60, where the first A says, we were compulsive eaters and could not manage their own lives. And that was me. I came to my first meeting when I was 15 years old. I was already a full-blown compulsive eater. I continued in OA for the next 6.5 years, not getting abstinent. And there's some people, they say, well, I got a year and then I went out. That wasn't me. In my first 6.5 years, I never got 2 weeks, and a lot of days I didn't even make it to lunch. And then I discovered bulimia. And I know some bulimics do it because they think it's kind of the ritual of it all, the binging, the purging. It's almost like a ritual. For me, it was very practical. I didn't want to gain weight. So I would binge and I would purge, and it would start where I would purge maybe twice a week. After 6.5 years in OA, I was binging and purging up to 6 times a day. I had to have my esophagus surgically retightened because of the abuse I heaped on it. I stole food. I stole money for food. I lived in New York City at the time, and I remember walking the streets of the city at 2 a.m. with my rent money, going out to buy food. This was all while I was in OA. I still couldn't stop. I had lots of sponsors. I estimated I had about 50 different sponsors. And sometimes, of course, I would get dropped and they would say, she doesn't want it badly enough. And that wasn't true. I wanted to stop more than anything in the world. My problem wasn't lack of desire. That wasn't my problem. And, sometimes it's like, okay, maybe we need to tweak your food plan a bit. I think I've had some of the world's best food plans. My problem wasn't lack of knowledge about how to eat healthy. My problem was lack of power. And this is how I understand it. On our book, on page 24, it says that we are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink, or for me, the first compulsive bite. That's a lot of weird words. I just knew like I couldn't stop eating. And now they're talking about memory and defense and suffering and consciousness. Like, what the heck does that all mean? And this is how I understand it. Normally, my defense against doing something dangerous is my memory, right? The book talks about hot stoves. So in my memory are all these data points of what happens when I touch a hot stove. So if I'm about to go touch a hot stove, my memory grabs the data points, generates a thought to run across the bridge that connects to my conscious mind and says, stop, danger, hot stoves will burn you. All this happens in a millisecond. I don't touch a hot stove. So let's take something a little more personal to me. I have a cat allergy. It's pretty bad. I've had asthma attacks from it. So stored in my memory are all these data points of cat-induced asthma attacks. So let's say a good friend of mine invites me to her house, and she has a cat, or my kids would say, "Mom, can you take us to the pet store?" And I'm tempted to say yes because I want to see my friends and I want my kids to be happy. So my memory will go grab the data points that say, "Up, cat-induced asthma attacks, danger, warning. If you go near a cat, you're in trouble." And my memory generates a little thought to run across the bridge to say, "Danger, stop, don't do it." And I don't go to my friend's house and I don't go into the pet store. So let's talk about food now. The best example I can give is when I was in college, again, going religiously to Overeaters Anonymous meetings. There was a certain brand of cookie I would binge on. It would come in a box of 20, and I would tell myself, I'm going to go get it, and I'm just going to have one or two. Well, we all know how that story ended over and over. I would eat the whole box and sometimes go out and get another box. So in my memory were all these data points that said, you say you're going to eat one or two, but you're going to eat the whole box. So there I go, about to go to the store, buy my box of cookies to have one or two. And my memory does its job. It goes and it grabs the data points that says, you say you're going to have one or two, but you're going to eat the whole box. Don't do it. Danger. Stop. You're going to gain weight. You're going to hate yourself. Stop. And the memory generates a little thought to run across the bridge to stop me. Except when it comes to food, my bridge was broken. I had a broken bridge and the thought could not get across to protect me. So my memory failed to hold me in check. I had no defense against that first compulsive bite. I couldn't keep the memory green the way people say. I had no ability to keep the memory green because all the food stuff in my memory couldn't make it to the conscious part of my mind. I couldn't tell myself, just stay away from certain trigger foods. I had no power. So there I was, the A of our ABCs. I was a compulsive eater. I couldn't manage my own life. If you're spending the rent money on food, already that's unmanageable. I got fired from a secretary job. I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't hold a boyfriend. I couldn't hold my own food down. I was a mess. And there I was at an OA convention, eating compulsively at the convention. But that was the day, 6.5 years in, where God said, today's the day. We're launching our mission, guys. And a woman stood up and she was holding a big book. And she said, I've done what's in this book and I haven't binged in a year. A year. Like I said, I couldn't make it I couldn't make it through an OA retreat without binging. And there's no way I would have approached her. She had this beautiful halo of blonde curls like an angel. And I was too scared. So I said to the girl next to me, do you know her? And as God would have it, she said, yeah, she's my sister. Come on, I'll introduce you. So she introduced me to that angel woman, Donna. And I talked to her and I just said, I need help. And she said, okay, read this book. So I went upstairs, I skipped the talent show that Saturday night, and I read the first 164 pages of the book. And I came down the next day and she said, are you willing to do everything that's in this book? And I said, no, there's this one amend I'm not willing to make. See, back when I was binging, I had a boyfriend who wasn't paying enough attention to me. So I did what any normal 21-year-old woman would do, right? I slashed myself up with razor blades, called him and told him I'd been mugged and raped, had him take me to the hospital for a rape exam, went through a rape exam, including taking the penicillin that the very nice nurse gave me so I wouldn't get syphilis from my fake rapist, and, imposed on the boyfriend who I loved, because that's just what I felt like doing. So I said, yeah, no, I'm not willing to make that amend and fess up. And she said something wise, I think. She said, are you willing to believe that by the time you get to your 9th step, you'll be a different person? And I said, okay, that makes sense to me. So I went home after the convention, still wasn't quite ready, binged, called her 2 weeks later. She said, come up to a meeting where I am. There's a whole bunch of people who she said, I'm like the newcomer there. Like, are you for real? Like, there's a group of people who haven't binged in over a year. So I was in New York City at the time. The meeting was 2 states away. I didn't care. I got on the train. I went up there. It was a meeting where they allowed questions and answers. And I said, I've been in the program for 6.5 years and I still can't stop binging. And this old timer said to me, you may have been going to meetings for 6.5 years, but you have not been in the program. And I thought, I'm home. But if we go to the B in our book on page 60, to believe that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism or compulsive eating. So here I was with a great group. But for a couple more months, I think 3 or 4 more months, I didn't get any better. And I thought about it and I thought, well, if I were diabetic and I went to a meeting of Diabetics Anonymous, it would feel great. Like, here's people who get me. They understand defective pancreas and all that. But if they're all sticking insulin in their arm and I'm not going to get one bit better just because I'm hanging out with people who have good information. I need to stick the insulin in my own arm. So eventually, that crotchety old timer who gave me that advice was someone I knew I could get away with nothing around that person. So one night, after stuffing bagel chips down my throat behind a locked bathroom door, set a meeting, and I went up to him and I said, will you help me? And he said, what are you willing to do? And I said, anything. There was no, well, there's this one amend I don't want to make. I said anything. If he had said, you need to leave your apartment and move an hour and a half away and quit your job and get a job up here, I would have done it because I was hopeless. And at that point, I met the conditions finally for being sponsorable, right? On page 58, it says, if you've decided you want what we have, a spiritual experience based on these steps, and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then, and I say then and only then, are you ready to take these steps? So I became willing, and I was told right off the bat, you're dishonest, I'm not going to keep working with you. And I've learned was really a fair thing to say, because if we're dishonest, it's like we take a big black magic marker and are writing the words, keep out God, across our hearts. God won't dwell where there's dishonesty. So I made a decision, me who made up fake rape stories and things like that, just as a matter of course, became rigorously honest. I mean, if a clerk withheld or gave me back an extra penny, I'd go back to the store. If I was saying something in mid-sentence, I realized it wasn't true, I would say, wait, what I just told you, that was dishonest. I mean, I just decided I was going to be honest no matter what. I put into practice what I knew, self-sacrifice, doing things for others. And when I left that meeting, again, I'd been binging my brains out right before the meeting, made a decision I was going to do whatever it took action by taking a sponsor who I knew was going to demand a lot of me. And I remember I went out into the parking lot and I said a prayer. And this was the prayer that I said. I said, God, I've always had fixed ideas about what you are like and how to worship you. I'm willing to admit it's all wrong and to start over and to let you show me what you're like and how to worship you. And it was like a hand reached into my soul and yanked out the obsession. It was just gone. And that was 38 years ago. It was just yanked out of me. So yeah, I believe God does search and rescue missions for us. And I'm looking at the C here, that we believe that God could and would if he were sought. And I think this really, and I'm going to get a little theoretical here. I think this can really trip us up sometime, because I realized all my life I had been a practical agnostic. I believed in God, but thought he was there for war and poverty and children starving in Ethiopia. And what did he care about me? What did he care about me? But this line, God could and would if he were sought, I found so helpful, because so first, if we're stuck on this, we can say, okay, do you believe that God could restore other people to sanity? And then, of course, if we've been coming to meetings for any length of time, it's, well, yes, he's done it for this one and that one. And, these 18 people I see every week on the meetings. So he could for them. Okay. And then next, do you believe he could for you if he wanted to? And then I'd have to say, well, he's God, so I guess he could if he wanted to, but I don't think he wants to. And then comes the next. So we believe God could, and then it's, do you believe God would if he were sought? And I know for me, and I think a lot of people, it's, he won't because I'm not worthy. And I've been thinking about that, and my conclusion there was, nowhere in the big book is worthiness a requirement. Only willingness is. I think all of us have had the experience where we've broken a leg or, sprained a wrist or had to get stitches. And when we went to the doctor, I don't think any of us said, doctor, don't stitch me up. Don't put a cast on me because I'm not worthy. But all of a sudden, when it comes to getting, God's help, like I would become so noble, or we could become so noble, like, no, I'm not worthy. And maybe a therapist would have said to me, oh no, Janet, you really are worthy. But I say, it's kind of irrelevant whether or not I was worthy. And personally, I didn't feel worthy. Anyone who did the stuff I did, just because if I pay someone $100 an hour to sit there and build up my esteem and tell me I'm worthy, it doesn't help, because deep down I know. But this program doesn't demand that I be worthy, only that I'm willing. Some other things that might be in my head or people's head is, well, I don't deserve it because I've done this really bad thing. I mean, I had done this really bad thing. And the answer to that is, yeah, that's why we have a 9th step, because the founders of the program did bad things and knew that we would do bad things, and gave us a way to fix it. By the way, I did make my amend to that, now ex-boyfriend, telling him the whole scam that I had done. Me in my addict mind was hopeful that he would think I was so noble for confessing and want to marry me and live happily ever after. He did not feel that way, but that's okay. My happily ever after is downstairs watching the World Series now. Remember page 100, the things that come to us when we put ourselves in God's hands are better than anything we could have planned. So, okay, again, we see it doesn't matter if we're worthy, only if we're willing. It doesn't matter if we've done some really bad stuff, because we get a chance to fix it. And then something that I think I felt, well, I've been trying for 6.5 years and it hasn't worked. What makes me think this time will be different? And for that, I just look at my cell phone and I say, okay, I could try 100 times to take a picture. Yep, I did it just again by pressing the on button, on off button, and nothing will happen. And then one of my kids will come by and say, Mom, you're pressing the wrong button. This is the camera button. And suddenly, even though I've done it wrong 100 times before, once I'm shown the right directions and I'm willing to listen to them, suddenly I can take pictures. So it doesn't matter if we've been doing it wrong for years and years. All we have to do is get with someone who has the right information and be willing to do whatever it takes. And suddenly we're taking pictures. we're recovering. And the last thing on the ABCs is God could and would if he were sought. Sometimes we're not sure if we're really seeking him. So I think there's two things to really ask ourselves. One, on a simple level, it means doing the steps. Are we continuing on the steps? But sometimes people have this vague feeling like, well, I'm not really seeking him. So what I would say is, okay, make a list of what you think it means to seek God, and then make a list of whether you are or aren't doing it. If you say you're not seeking him, what are you not doing that you think you should? And if someone's saying, well, my sponsor told me to do whatever it is, and I'm not doing it, then I say, you're right, you're not seeking him. Unless your sponsor's telling you something ludicrous, like go rob a bank, in which case, obviously get a new sponsor. But if your sponsor's telling you, put your food on a scale, go to a certain number of meetings, make a certain amount of phone calls, connect with God every morning. I tell all my sponsees 30 minutes a day, spend with God, because this is all about developing a relationship with God. I mean, when I was dating my husband, we spent time together. We got to know each other. We need to get to know God. He already knows us and loved us even in our worst messes, but we want to spend time developing this relationship. So after that, I cleaned up my past, right? 4 through 9, inventoried my resentments, my fears, my harms, asked God to remove my defects. And that to me, I think is so cool, the 7th step. So I created all this wreckage, and God would be perfectly within his rights to say, Janet, you made this mess, you clean it up, and I'll be here waiting for you when you clean it up, right? Isn't that what I did with my kids so many times, unfortunately? But God didn't do that with me. God said, you made this mess. It's a little bit too hard for you to clean up. So you get a broom, I'll get a broom, we'll clean up together. And the parts that are too hard for you, I'll do by myself for you. I made my amends, and now I spend my life living imperfectly, but living in 10, 11, and 12. I clean up the wreckage of my day. I spend time with God because I want to know what his will for me is. And then I talked about the broken bridge that I had in my memory. I believe that bridge never gets fixed. The bridge between my memory and my conscious mind never gets fixed. The only solution is I need to build a new bridge. And that's a bridge that God can come across and protect me, right? Doesn't the beginning of working with others say that we get immunity from compulsive eating? God protects me. So in step 12, I help other people build their bridges. And I just try to practice these principles that I've learned: unselfishness, honesty, putting the welfare of others ahead of my own. That's really how God launched his search and rescue mission for me. If you don't believe it's possible for you because you're not sure that God exists, so you can't say the prayer that I did, here's a simpler prayer that maybe will help. God, I don't know if you're there. I don't know if you exist. And if you do exist, I don't know if you care about me. But if you do exist and you do care, I need help. The worst thing that can happen is you're talking to dead air and nothing at all happens. But I know that's not what happens. And I think that when we say a prayer like that, it lets God go into action. See, in the physical world, money is the currency, right? I want a bag of groceries or a tank of gas. I go to the store and I hand the clerk, my credit card or some money. Well, I can't say I need help, God, and hand him a $20 bill. The currency in the spiritual world is faith and prayer. So when I say that prayer, I imagine God saying to his little team of, these little miniature angels with their hard hats and tool belts, okay, guys, time, you can go to work and start the renovation project on her soul. And when God rewires our soul to make my priorities more like his priorities, to get rid of my selfishness and make me more unselfish like him, the illness of compulsive eating, the obsession just gets expelled, taken out like so much trash. So I believe a prayer like that can really set things in motion if we start alongside of it, practicing the spiritual principles that we know. A friend of mine who was a recovered alcoholic said, everyone who comes into AA can stop lying and stop stealing. We may not know a lot, but we know we can get honest. We know we can start doing things for the people who God has placed in our lives. Got it. So we can start doing that. And, I'm actually ready to wrap up. So I'll just close with this. This may be the night of gremlins and goblins, but it is the age of miracles. Really and truly, the age of miracles is still with us. Happy Halloween, or as my friend Roger would say, happy Sunday.